China's human rights record and economic coercion are in the spotlight amid a meeting between the United States and the CCP today. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao in San Francisco, where that meeting took place. Iris, tell us, what do we know about President Biden's message thus far?
To you, Steve. So in a very short while, President Biden will hold a solo press conference right here at a Florida estate right here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is exactly where the U.S. meeting with CCP officials was taking place earlier today. And the White House told us this morning that President Biden will no doubt bring up human rights issues with China candidly. And President Biden said during the meeting this morning that he's trying to responsibly manage the competition between U.S. and China so that it does not veer into conflict. However, he also said this on Tuesday. Watch.
To get back on a normal course of corresponding, being able to pick up a phone and talk to one another if there's a crisis. But I'm not going to continue to sustain the support for positions where if we want to invest in China, we have to turn over all our trade secrets.
And today's meeting also comes as concerns are mounting over China's aggression, especially after the U.S. shot down a Chinese spy balloon earlier this year. And of course, as the FBI Director Christopher Wray has been warning about a rise in Chinese espionage activities. And while the U.S. is trying to maintain and perhaps improve its relationship with China, the U.S.-China Security and Economic Commission today published a report saying that actually there's been doubts about U.S.-China diplomacy as China has been using its influence around the world trying to manipulate political and economic activities in different countries. It adds that China has been only getting more aggressive and its approach has been even more sophisticated. Meanwhile, a senior Biden administration official also told me last night that a very concerning feature of Chinese diplomacy is its economic coercion toward other countries. He says that U.S. allies and the U.S. need to work together to counter that. And meanwhile, Republicans have been calling on the Biden administration to be tougher on China. Here's Mitch McConnell on the floor today. Watch.
The Biden administration has too often met this historic moment with weakness and naivete. Time and time again, it has sacrificed competition on the altar of green climate policy.
And thus, as Republican presidential candidate and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis published an op-ed on China on the New York Post on Tuesday. He says that both parties of the U.S. are mistakenly treating China as a friendly competitor, while in fact, he says, is a hostile Marxist regime that if we allow them to continue doing what they're doing, it's going to exploit our openness and steal more of our technology. Back to you.
NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao reporting from San Francisco, where the APEC meeting is underway. Thank you, Iris. So who has the upper hand going into the APEC summit, the United States or Communist China? Joining us now to explore the dynamics of the meeting, we have Dennis Wilder, Senior Fellow for the Initiative for U.S.-China Dialogue on Global Issues at Georgetown University. Professor Dennis Wilder, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Professor, CCP leader Xi Jinping fine-tuning the country's propaganda organs to sound more friendly to the United States heading into this meeting with President Biden. The Chinese economy heading in the wrong direction by all accounts, reports of internal struggles inside of Zhongnanhai. Does the United States have to be cautious with dealing with a desperate China? And how does the CCP go about leveraging international summits like this to further its geopolitical and strategic goals?
Well, in some ways, the headwinds that Xi Jinping is dealing with give us some advantages. He doesn't feel as confident. He shouldn't feel as confident. We don't know what happened to his foreign minister. We don't know what happened to his defense minister. We don't even know what happened to the leadership of his nuclear forces. So this man is a fragile leader at this point, a fragile superpower. Of course, he will come in and try and hide those vulnerabilities. He'll try and use the usual Chinese tactics, pretending that the relationship is healing at a point when we know it really isn't healing. He will want, with the international business community that he will see this evening, to really woo them. And of course, they will come eager for contracts with China. But I think we can say that this will be a more realistic meeting than most, because it's obvious that the Chinese have vulnerabilities right now.
What are the potential risks, say, for other nations participating in these summits with China, considering the CCP's underlying objectives?
Well, with the Chinese, you always have to look out for the fact that they aren't going to come up straight. For example, with the Philippines, they act as if they haven't militarized the islands of the South China Sea when they obviously have. You always have to watch out when you're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party because it is non-transparent. They don't even publish figures on unemployment anymore in China in the way they used to because they're embarrassed by those figures. So, there is a need to verify everything that the Chinese tell you, and you can't really take things at face value.
You mentioned the meeting after the Biden meeting with the CCP leader this evening on the business side. Could you discuss the role of economic and trade discussions in these summits and how they may be used by the CCP for strategic advantages?
Well, the Biden administration actually has restricted China in several key areas, semiconductors, things dealing with quantum, AI. The Chinese will try and see if they can get around those restrictions. They may want to go to American corporations and see if some of those corporations would deal with them a little bit under the table or go right up to the edge of the rules. So we have to be vigilant. The Biden administration, I think, has done the right thing by trying to restrict technologies that might go to the Chinese military. But now we have to follow through and verify and keep an eye on it. Similarly with our allies like Japan and South Korea, the Netherlands, the British, we need them all to do the same thing. Keep an eye on your corporations. We've been taken too many times in the past. Too much American technology has ended up in the hands of the Chinese military for fighter aircraft and other advanced systems. We need to stop that. It is really insane for us to be helping the Chinese build a modern military.
And to the Biden administration's credit, oftentimes over the past decades, whenever a world leader, a U.S. president meets with China, human rights often takes a back seat. Reports coming out right now, White House is saying that this human rights will be on the table. How important is that when meeting the leader of China?
It's extremely important. I worked for George W. Bush. Whenever George W. Bush went to Beijing and had meetings, he always insisted on going to church. And I would have to find a church for him to attend with real Chinese people in it to make the point to the Chinese that we cared. And it does make a difference. The Chinese are then put on record. Similarly, Biden needs to make a point on Uyghurs, particularly in West China, on the Christian church in China, on journalists. There are a lot of categories where the Chinese human rights record right now is bad and getting worse, and we need to lay down markers.
Professor Dennis Wilder, thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure being with you.
The House Homeland Security Committee is nearing an end to its impeachment inquiry into the DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Today, Mayorkas and FBI Director Christopher Wray testifying before the committee and were grilled with questions on threats to the homeland, such as the uptick in Chinese nationals crossing the southern border and the possible presence of Hamas-related terrorists in the United States. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports from Capitol Hill.
For the third year in a row, the U.S. has hit a record high number of apprehensions at the border, 2.4 million in 2023, and that's not including the number of people who evaded Border Patrol, and many say they are the most dangerous ones.
We do not minimize the significance of the challenge at the southwest border.
That wasn't my question, Mr. Mayorkas. I asked a simple question. Give me a number.
Others are particularly concerned about exactly who is coming in. Chinese nationals were apprehended at a rate of 24,000 in 2023. That's 12 times more than last year and a 7,000% increase from 2021.
I mean, a lot of them are military-aged guys with former ties not only to the CCP but also the People's Liberation Army, the PLA. That's not to say that if we were to defend Taiwan against a Chinese invasion, there wouldn't be saboteurs here.
Chinese nationals on average pay $75,000 to be smuggled into the United States. and it makes you wonder where they get that money.
Special interest aliens from China. What are they doing here? Are they being directed? Is there some larger intelligence?
And when FBI Director Christopher Wray was asked specifically about this issue, he pointed to the non-traditional tactics that are used by the CCP to undermine our national security.
There are individuals who are affiliated with the Chinese government who are the subject of investigations that we have here, and some of those are people that we're searching for.
Wray was also pressed on a different point, specifically the threat of Hamas-related terrorists in the United States. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene pressed the agency to do more to investigate the issue. And this hearing comes at a time when the committee is pressing forward to hold a second impeachment vote on DHS Secretary Mayorkas. The chairman of the committee, Mark Green, tells me that they're aiming to have this vote by the end of the year. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.